Hello and welcome to Radio Free America.
So yeah, this gave me a good laugh.
I'm glad you had a good laugh about this human trafficking victim story, Danny. This is why I don't care that I drove you off of TikTok, because you are a slimy little pathetic worm.
The second type of account is true believers like Madeline Pendleton and Millennial Chaos. These are creators who have been brainwashed by North Korean propaganda. They fully believe it, and so they use their platforms to spread misinformation and propaganda supporting North Korea. These accounts can be very dangerous because a lot of people look up to these creators and believe what they're saying. However, these accounts are not affiliated with the North Korean government.
Hey, that's me! If you weren't aware, I am also on TikTok under millennial.chaos, and I'm making this video as kind of an ode to TikTok, since I'm assuming that by the time you are watching this, it will probably not exist anymore, at least in America. This is Danny, as she currently calls herself Danny, North Korea version. The account is at North Korea Edu, but Danny here, well, she's a Fed. And I'm about to tell you the story of how I drove her off of TikTok and caused her to stop making videos. And yes, I'm very proud of that. This is my TikTok page, and one of my playlists is called Danny Debunks. It is specifically all of the times that I have debunked the Fed nonsense that Danny spreads about North Korea. There's 27 videos in this playlist. I have made 27 videos debunking what Danny says about North Korea. Now, I'm not going to bother showing you any of these videos. I'm not going to go over any of them. I'm just going to give you kind of a greatest hits of all the delusional nonsense that Danny tried to spread about North Korea and the ways in which I debunked it, which caused her to go radio silent for the last 4 months. The first video I made debunking Danny was from way back in July of 2023, so that is approximately a year and a half, a little over a year and a half that I have been debunking her. One thing about Danny is that she lies a lot, which I will cover in this video, but I find it funny because in the comments on her video that she made where she mentioned me and called me a true believer, is that she said, "I'm blocked so I can't see." She's referring to me. This is a blatant lie. Danny has had me blocked for a year and a half. She blocked me before I even made a video response to her. She blocked me after I left one single comment on the first video of hers that I saw. I can't remember if I was just scrolling through TikTok or if somebody sent it to me or tagged me in it. What did I say to get blocked by Danny? I asked her a simple question. I said, "What CIA-backed think tank do you work for?" That was enough to get me an instant block, which should kind of tell you something about Danny, shouldn't it? And the reason I ask that is because Danny professes to be a North Korea researcher, or a former North Korea researcher, I believe. So she would have worked for a think tank. She's American. It would have been one of the ones perhaps based in Washington, D.C., that just spreads all kinds of absolute nonsensical lies about America's enemy, North Korea. Now, I'm not in the interest of doxing, but I am, I think, about 90% sure that I know who Danny is and that I know which think tank she works for. I'm not going to say anything about that, but the think tank that I believe she works for is not directly funded by the US government, but they absolutely parrot lies from other organizations that are directly connected to the US government, like Radio Free Asia. So let's get into it, shall we? Let me give you the greatest hits of Danny.
Welcome to the next edition of debunking misinformation about North Korea that I see on TikTok. In the last video, I started to talk about this video by Madeline Pendleton. In it, she claims that everything that we know about North Korea is basically CIA propaganda. In that video, I did a deep dive on why that isn't true. You can click this comment if you want to see. But in this next part, I'm going to share the actual reliable sources for information on North Korea that are not CIA propaganda.
The first thing I would like to highlight is Danny's sources. She clearly says that her sources are not CIA propaganda in this video and in many other videos. So let's see about that.
He also leads my favorite news and analysis site on North Korea called nknews.org. They're headquartered in Seoul and have a lot of international workers, including some from North Korea. Here are some additional sources that I really like. Again, a lot of these are located overseas, have a lot of international workers.
So here are some of the sources that Danny likes to use. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them. They're all Western media. They all at least cite the CIA. But I'm going to focus on a couple of the most egregious ones. Let's start with 38 North. Here is 38 North's website, Informed Analysis of Events in and Around North Korea. You can see at the top it says it is a publication of the Stimson Center. We can head on over to the Stimson Center's website where we can find an interesting statement here. They say we have a responsibility to ensure that our work is free from conflict or bias. One way Stimson does that is through public transparency. So yeah, they are quite transparent about their funding sources. The problem is what the funding sources are. They have a list of all their funders from the fiscal year 2023, and we can see some very interesting entries on here. All kinds of enemies of North Korea, like the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Government of Australia, the Government of Switzerland. We've got defense contractors like Lockheed Martin who donate to the Stimson Center. These are organizations that thrive off of these Western governments having an enemy that they can manufacture consent about to drum up defense spending. They have my government, the Government of Canada, giving them $100K a year. They, of course, have the U.S. Department of State giving them $160,000 a year. That is far from the only entry for the U.S. government here. You've got the Embassy of Japan. Yes, Japan, who occupied Korea for decades using their women as sex slaves. Here we have my government again, Global Affairs Canada, giving $1 million. $1 million to the Stimson Center to spread propaganda about their enemies. We also have capitalist mega corporations like Microsoft, giving them over $250,000. And there it is, the United States Department of State, $200,000 in 2023. Yeah, the Stimson Center is not a good source. 38 North is a publication of it. This is 38 North's funding as well. What do people think these organizations fund the Stimson Center for? Why does the United States government fund the Stimson Center? Is it to uncover the truth about their enemies, or is it to find a way to demonize their enemies? What do we think? 38 North's most important contribution to the propaganda space about the DPRK is their digital atlas, which seems to be perpetually undergoing maintenance. I haven't been able to access this thing for months. But what it did is it showed satellite data of North Korea, and it would highlight things that defectors had said. So they would show some group of buildings that they called a concentration camp or a prison camp or whatever, and then they would have a little spot just outside of it highlighted that said, this is where public executions happen. And the source for that is just what some defector said. And of course, as we will cover in this video, defector testimony is utterly useless. So yeah, of course, Danny likes 38 North because Danny is a Fed. But let's look at an even more egregious entry on here. It's kind of covered by the caption there, but this is Daily NK. Danny loves Daily NK. Danny cites Daily NK all the time, which is really, really interesting considering something else I'm about to show you. We'll get to that. Here is Daily NK's website. They have a page called Our Collaborators, and on it you can see the National Endowment for Democracy. It says Daily NK receives funding from the National Endowment for Democracy. Also, in their press kit, they admit that they were started with a grant from the National Endowment for Democracy and that they couldn't exist without yearly funding from the NED. Yeah, one problem with that, the National Endowment for Democracy is a CIA cutout. Even on Wikipedia, it admits that upon its founding, the NED assumed several former activities of the CIA. Political groups, activists, academics, and some governments have accused the NED of being an instrument of U.S. foreign policy helping to foster regime change. Both of the founders of the NED admitted that it's a CIA cutout. One of them said it was created because it would be terrible for democratic groups around the world to be seen as subsidized by the CIA. And the other one said, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA. The National Endowment for Democracy exists to do regime change around the world for all of America's enemies. They fund organizations like the Daily NK to spread propaganda about their enemies, to manufacture consent against their enemies. Now, to show you why Daily NK is an absolute horrible source, I'm just going to show you this. This is an article from today, the day I'm filming this video, January 18th, 2025. North Korean elite woman take ghost jobs to escape forced labor. Look at their source. A source in the province told Daily NK on Thursday. They exclusively use anonymous sources. They are an organization funded by a CIA cutout, a regime change organization of the US government that exclusively uses anonymous sources. And Danny cites Daily NK articles that use anonymous sources. Now, if this sounds familiar, it should, because Radio Free Asia does the same thing. Radio Free Asia is American state media, which was started by the CIA during the Cold War to propagandize about America's communist enemies. And Radio Free Asia also pretty much exclusively uses anonymous sources. I like to call Daily NK Radio Free Asia 2.0 because even Western liberals seem to be catching on to the Radio Free Asia grift. So I see a lot more propaganda like this. Women taking ghost jobs to escape forced labor. I'm seeing a lot more of this being posted through Daily NK instead of through Radio Free Asia, which normally the CIA would just use them. So here's the reason why I bring up Radio Free Asia, and I cannot for the life of me find what video this comment is on anymore. I'm not sure if Danny deleted it, but I'm just going to show a screenshot from my video. This is Danny saying, I don't use Radio Free Asia as a source ever. She also doesn't cite Yeonmi Park. She calls Yeonmi Park a liar, and apparently she says she's met Yeonmi Park. Interesting. So here's the thing. Why does she not cite Radio Free Asia? She doesn't explain that. She's posted this in comments multiple times that I've seen. Again, I can't find any right now. But why doesn't she use Radio Free Asia as a source? Because it's American state media. It's directly controlled by US Congress. It was started by the CIA. And it exclusively uses anonymous sources. That's probably some or maybe all of her reasons. So why does she cite Daily NK? Because it's essentially the same. It's funded by the CIA. It exclusively uses anonymous sources. Why is Daily NK a good source to use, but Radio Free Asia is not? Like I said, it's because too many Western liberals have caught on to the Radio Free Asia grift, and none of them know about the Daily NK grift. They don't know what the National Endowment for Democracy is. Okay, I found another one of my screenshots of a comment where she explains why she doesn't use Radio Free Asia. She says, it's directly linked to / funded by the US government, so I don't use it as a source. But she still says they do get most of their reporting right. They don't. But isn't that so interesting? She doesn't use it because it's directly linked to / funded by the US. That perfectly describes Daily NK and many of the other sources that she uses. But here's the funny part. Danny says she never uses Radio Free Asia as a source. That's a lie. I pointed out that was a lie. Let me show you.
And you might have seen in the news over the last few years that they've really been cracking down on this.
So let me show you this here. This is from one of Danny's videos. She's citing an India Today article. Act of treason, Kim Jong-un orders North Koreans to stop killing themselves. Here is that India Today article that Danny is citing. It's a Radio Free Asia article just posted by India Today. This entire India Today article is just based on a Radio Free Asia report. But Danny says she never cites Radio Free Asia. Well, clearly Danny doesn't know the difference between primary sources, secondary sources, tertiary sources, because she is citing this India Today article, which is simply reiterating what Radio Free Asia says. And here is the Radio Free Asia article that India Today is just parroting, and you can see it's also based off of anonymous people, anonymous government officials who probably don't exist. So yeah, Danny is a liar. Not only does she cite Radio Free Asia, just perhaps indirectly instead of directly, but she also cites other organizations that are almost identical to Radio Free Asia and have the same biases. Another source that Danny really likes to use and cites all the time is from the UN. It's the 2014 report of the Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Now, this is important for a few reasons. First, let me show you. This is from the United Nations website. This is recorded video of the hearings that they did before publishing this Commission of Inquiry report. And there's something very important that I need to highlight here. This is the first day of hearings. The very first speaker they had was Mr. Shin Dong-hyuk. He spoke for almost 2 hours. The reason that's important is because Shin Dong-hyuk, shortly after giving that testimony, retracted some of the most important parts of his story that he gave to the UN Commission of Inquiry, which was published in that report that Danny loves to cite. You may be familiar with this article from The Guardian. Why do North Korean defector testimonies so often fall apart? This was posted because Shin Dong-hyuk recanted the most important parts of his story. The article states, in a report released last year, the UN accused the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un of crimes against humanity and called for the case to be referred to the International Criminal Court. UN investigators had been denied access to the country, so the organization had instead carried out 240 confidential interviews with North Korean refugees living in South Korea, Japan, the UK, and the US, including Shin Dong-hyuk, whose story was told in the best-selling Escape from Camp 14. This book right here. Then, the DPRK government released a video claiming to show Shin's father denouncing his son's stories as fake. When questioned, Shin confessed that parts of his account were also inaccurate, including sections on his time in Camp 14, the infamous labor camp for political prisoners, and the age at which he was tortured. So the star witness for the 2014 UN Commission of Inquiry report is an admitted liar. That report is still widely cited today, not just by Danny, by all kinds of different Western organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, etc. And Danny has videos about this where she tries to explain why it doesn't matter that the key witness for this report is an admitted liar, but that's for another video. Now, this is just emblematic of why, as I said before, North Korean defector testimony is utterly useless. And I don't even recommend using this specific article. This was written by Ji-young Song. This is a truncated article. She has a full version on her blog, which is linked at the end of this article. I would recommend using that instead because it's quite a bit more interesting. Ji-young Song, or J-Song as she calls herself on her blog, is someone who works directly with North Korean defectors to get testimony from them. She does interviews with North Korean defectors. And this entire article is essentially denouncing her own work. She says something very telling in it. This work is partly my own confession, observation, and self-assessment to improve the quality of North Korean studies. She is treating this as a confession, perhaps because she feels guilty that she has facilitated blatant lies being spread about North Korea. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this. That's actually a story for another video. I'm going to make a video that goes really in depth on the defector industry and how it churns out some of the most egregious lies, but I'll just show you some of the headings so you can see what the issues are. Cash payments for defector testimonies, people lie when paid to, unverifiable data, access to information, the role of the South Korean National Intelligence Service, which is really interesting. That is South Korea's spy agency. You'll know all about this if you've watched the documentary Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang in Seoul, which obviously, if you haven't, go give it a watch right now. Then come back to this video. But I digress. Like I said, Danny loves this report and she cites it all the time. And it's led to some pretty embarrassing situations for her that could have caused her to abandon her account and stop posting. So Danny started this series, which she never finished because she stopped posting, about 100 plus crazy facts about North Korea.
Number 4, no transportation. North Koreans who don't live in Pyongyang, which is most of them, don't have access to private or public transportation. Now, this would be great if their towns and cities were walkable, but they're not. Everything is very spread out, and 80% of the country's land is covered in mountains. If men are able to afford bikes, they're allowed to ride them, but women aren't. Women can't legally ride bikes in North Korea because it is quote-unquote unladylike.
Well, that's a wild claim. That's a very interesting claim. If men can afford bikes, they're allowed to ride them, but women are legally not allowed to ride them as they're considered unladylike. And the source is the United Nations Human Rights Council report on the Commission of Inquiry, the 2014 UN report, which the key witness was a admitted liar, but whatever. So here is the report, the UN Commission of Inquiry report, that states that women in North Korea can't legally ride bikes. You'll never guess what the source for this is. This report states that regulations in force until 2012 prohibiting women from riding bicycles were reintroduced in January 2013, and the footnote is 359. Here's the footnote. Women on bicycles banned again. Daily NK. So yeah, not only is the UN 2014 Commission of Inquiry report based off of retracted defector testimony, they also insert some other sources in there. Ones like Daily NK that are funded by a CIA cutout. So here is that Daily NK article, and I'm sure you won't be surprised to see that it's an anonymous source. A source told Daily NK. So, the problem with this specific type of propaganda is that it is very easily disproven. And when it's disproven, it raises some really interesting questions about Danny, about Daily NK, and about the UN. See, because anyone can go on YouTube and watch videos of people, for instance, biking around North Korea, and look at what you might find. That's 2 women riding bikes in North Korea. See, this propaganda requires the Western delusion that no video from North Korea ever reaches the Western internet, which is completely false, of course. But yeah, I made a response to Danny on TikTok where I showed not just this instance, I showed a bunch. In just a few minutes of searching, I found at least half a dozen examples of women riding bikes in North Korea. The funny thing, one of the examples was a woman driving right past a KPA soldier. If it was illegal, he sure didn't care about it. It's of course not illegal. It's absurd. Women can ride bikes in North Korea. The Daily NK is lying, the UN is lying, and of course Danny is lying. Something else also happened with Danny's 100 Plus Crazy Facts series. If you'll notice, it goes from 6 to 10. This video is irrelevant, but we'll get to this one in a minute. And then it goes to 16 to 20. Well, where's 11 to 15? Why is 11 to 15 not there anymore? Danny took it down because she made a very, very egregious error in it that I pointed out. Obviously, since she took it down, I can't just show the video here, so I'll have to show my TikTok about it.
Ideological education. Majority of the K-12 school syllabus in North Korea is dedicated to learning about the achievements and the teachings of the Kims, as well as North Korea's official version of their history. This is an English translation of a North Korean textbook teaching their students about Kim Jong-il. You can pause to read.
So here's Danny showing what she describes as an English translation of a North Korean textbook, which, first of all, raises a lot of questions. Who translated this? It says the history of North Korea for use in schools. Why was this translated into English? Who translated this into English? And why did they keep all the nice formatting? You can see at the bottom there it says the source is nknews.org. Now I saw this video and I scoured NK News for this source. It doesn't exist anymore. I think it might have at one point, but it was probably taken down. And it was taken down for a good reason. It was taken down because the source of it is a Cracked.com article from 2007, which doesn't even actually exist on the internet anymore. You have to go look at it through the Wayback Machine. Cracked is a humor satire website. They made this up as a joke. Now, the funny thing about it is, I don't know if Cracked is making fun of propagandists like Danny who tell some of the most blatant lies about North Korea, or if they are also falling for that propaganda and just riffing off of it. But either way, this is very clearly fake. It was created for satire purposes. This is the page that Danny showed. She only showed one page from it. And the reason she did is because she thinks it's so silly, because it says Kim Jong-il emerged walking out from his mother's patriotic and revolutionary vagina. Yeah, it's satire. It's actually kind of funny. How did she not know that this was satire? Look at the other pages. Our versatile and cosmopolitan leader has visited all 7 corners of the earth. While averaging 300 points per game in the NBA, he discovered art among the cowards and homosexuals of Europe. Like, it could not be clearer that this is satire. It's effective satire, apparently, because even a self-professed North Korea researcher falls for it. Well, either she fell for it or she was trying to make her viewers fall for it, which most of them do because they're absolute idiots. But yeah, I made a video. I pointed out that Danny had cited a satirical Cracked article unironically, and she dirty deleted the video. She took the video down. She never addressed it. I got some of my followers to go and ask her on some of her videos to address why that video is missing, and she just either ignored them or deleted those comments. Now, at this point, I had definitely weakened Danny. I had perhaps made her start to reconsider whether she should be posting this obvious disinformation on TikTok, because people like me exist that sure love to debunk it. And then she did something really, really gross and really, really, really bad. And somehow she didn't take down that video. It's this one. Debunking North Korean propaganda, kctv.com video.
Okay, let's debunk some really funny North Korean propaganda. This North Korean propaganda account posted a slideshow thingy of this woman who is supposedly a North Korean, and she's telling her story.
Really funny propaganda, Danny says. Really funny propaganda. Some of you may be familiar with this if you had stopped this video and went to watch that documentary that I told you to watch, Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang in Seoul. You'll probably remember this screen cap. You'll recognize it.
So yeah, this gave me a good laugh. Okay,
It gave her a good laugh, watching this woman's story. And Danny here claims that it's from kctv.now. That's not the source of it. That's just somebody who re-uploaded it somewhere. And it's so funny that she cites KCTV Now for this when that's not where it's from, because I always see people in her comments asking for her opinion on the documentary Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang in Seoul. And she doesn't respond to them.
이렇게 경찰한테 조사받는 거면 이젠 돈은 갈 길이 없겠구나. 나는 포기해야 되겠다. 가족한테 못 들어가겠다. 근데 내가 가족을 영원히 만나지 못한다면 차라리 그 아픔을 안고 내가 살아가기는 너무 무섭고 힘들다. 차라리 죽자. 이렇게 생을 아예 버리게 됐어요. 그래서 절피람이라는 수면제로 60알을 순간에 먹습니다. 근데 그때는 경찰들이 밀착 감시를 하기 때문에 하룻밤이라도 불이 꺼져 있고 불이 안 켜져 있으면 우르르 제 집에 올라와서 문 열고 들어와서 뭐 하나 지켜보는 이런 상황이었어요. 그 정도로 저는 아무도 보호할 사람도 없었고 대변해줄 사람도 없었고 어제 경찰들이 자기 마음대로 주물 수 있는 이런 정말 가벼운 이런 사람이었죠. 그날도 약 먹고 쓰러졌는데 경찰들이 불 꺼져 있으니까 올라와서 쓰러져 있으니까 119 차를 불러서 병원에 실어갔죠. 하루 만에 의식을 차립니다. 정신을 잃었다가. 근데 그 약물 중독으로 해서 제가 20일 동안을 하반신 마비를 걸려요. 걷지를 못합니다. 그래서 병원에서 20일 동안을 휠체어를 타고 다녀요. 20일 만에 다시 태어나서 집으로 왔는데 내가 죽지 않고 살아서 집에 나왔다는 게 나를 용서할 수가 없었어요. 왜냐면 살아서 가족을 구리는 마음으로 살아서 견뎌갈 힘이 나한테는 없었기 때문이죠. 그래서 다시 죽자. 난 안 돼도 죽어야 된다. 살아서 살 힘이 없다 해서 면도칼로 곧 태어난 그 다음 날로 다시 덕맥을 끊습니다. 이게 수술자리인데요. 덕맥을 끊어서 쓰러졌는데 또 이렇게 피가 쫙 침대 밑에 뚝뚝뚝 떨어지는 소리를 들으면서 의식을 또 잃어요. 아, 난 죽는구나. 그래서 쫙 이러는데 또 경찰들이 와서 차에 실려가서 수술장 들어가서 수술받고 살아나오게 되죠.
Okay, let's debunk some really funny North Korean propaganda.
That's really funny, huh, Danny? That's really funny. This woman's story about how she so desperately wanted to return to her family in North Korea that she tried to kill herself multiple times, and the South Korean authorities wouldn't even let her do that. That's funny to somebody like Danny. Isn't that just disgusting? Danny is not a girl's girl. That's for fucking sure.
So yeah, this gave me a good laugh.
I'm glad you had a good laugh about this human trafficking victim story, Danny. This is why I don't care that I drove you off of TikTok, because you are a slimy little pathetic worm. So yeah, I had pointed out those things that Danny had did, those egregious errors that Danny had made, all of the biased sources that Danny uses, and I think it wore her down over time. She tried to post through it for a little bit. She tried to continue on with her 100 plus crazy facts series, but she gave up on it. Then the second last video she uploaded was that call out post about me and Madeline Pendleton. Then she posted one more video after that and then went radio silent for over 4 months now. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Listen, it's bad that the US is banning TikTok, but maybe some good can come from it. These disgusting Fed propagandists can't spread their nonsense anymore, at least on TikTok. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notifications. And hopefully, I'll see you on the next one.